And happy Sunday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, January 7th, 2024. I got it right, Val. I thought I was going to mess it up. 2024. And this is the deal. And as always, Val Atkinson is here. Hey, Val.
Hey Ed, glad to be here, buddy.
Well, I am too. Glad to be above ground, as they would say. The old folks used to say. There's a whole bunch to talk about, Val. Just as a programming note for the rest of the year, you're going to have to stay around. This is an election year, federal election year. We're going to have a lot of people in to try to help us make sense of things. This first show, I wanted to just be me and Val and kind of catch everybody up, but also kind of prime us for what's going to happen the rest of the year. And I don't want to waste any time. I want to talk real quick, Val, about go real quick to the Middle East in Jordan and Lebanon. There's been a worry that they were going to push what's going on in Israel into those countries, and it happened in Lebanon first. The Hamas second in command was killed in Lebanon, which could spark even more fighting. And Israel has also announced that they think it's going to take the rest of the year to finish their operation. Now, best I recollect, Val, Hamas was a one-day operation into Israel. About 1,100 Israelis were killed, which is too many. Let's agree on that. But now there's this disproportionality by Israel, which they're saying it's going to take a whole year to make up for that one day, and we already passed the 20,000 dead mark in Gaza. So, Val, please help me understand why it's going to take Israel a whole year to make up for what happened on that one day in God when the Hamas went into Israel. What's going on?
Because it ain't about parity. It ain't about making up for something that happened. You got to go back to what the original goal is when Israel first started this fight with Hamas. They want to feel free. They want to feel safe. They want to be able to control non-Israelis in the entire Middle East. The entire Middle East is their goal. That's the only way they can feel safe. And to say it's going to take a year, I think that's an underestimation there. It could take longer than that because they want to kill or dismember or disable anybody who disagrees with the right of Israel to exist. And on top of that list of organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, those kind of people, those kind of organizations who have openly admitted and went along with the notion that we want Israel gone. So Israel says that, well, I believe in a two-state solution, but I got to have some sign off on how that other state is comprised. Who's running it? So they want to run the other state. They want to be able to say it's okay for Joe Blow to be the prime minister or the president of another state in Gaza. It's something we've got to go back to the beginning, Ed, and figure out, do we want to sign off onto that? We, meaning the United States of America. Do we want a Zionist dictatorship in the Middle East where everybody else has to kowtow to? Is that what we want? Is that what we're looking for? And do we really think that Iran and China and Russia and North Korea, just to name four, would just sit by and twiddle their thumbs while we totally westernize the Middle East? I don't think that that's going to happen.
No.
It may get hot. It may get to warlike conditions, but I don't think it's going to happen. And you got a lot of hawks out preaching and pushing that solution, Ed. They are preaching and pushing. Well, you got to do something with Iran now before they get a nuclear weapon. You might as well fight them now before you have to fight them later. And you know that Russia and North Korea are right around the corner, so you got to prepare for them. We need to worry about North Korean nukes. Maybe we can nuke them first and take out. So, you know, I've been watching a lot of movies, and I watched one lately called LBJ, where we're talking about his war with Vietnam and how Bob McNamara talked him into doing what he did, killing 58,000 people that didn't need to be killed. But I can see a similarity here with the Middle East. This is what the Hawks are trying to bait us into. Go and totally win the Middle East, because the Middle East, save China, is the biggest non-westernized area on the planet that's left. Think about it. That is it. That's the last one standing, save China. And China has become a little westernized itself. You look at the way it's dressed, its culture issues there, its economic and financial issues there that they didn't used to have long time ago when Mao Zedong was running things, okay? They've come closer to that. So has Russia and a lot. So the job of westernizing the planet, it has a stumbling block, a roadblock, and it's called the Middle East.
Yeah, that is something I worry about, that this spillover that's going to happen that you're alluding to here, because there are other people in the world. We are very American centric here. We think that our 350 million people trumps all the other 7 billion people on the planet, and everybody needs to be exactly like us because we're special, right? I have often try to disabuse people of the fact that just because it happens in America does not mean it's the best. I know that's the rhetoric that we teach in school from the time kids are in kindergarten. I guess it serves a purpose. It keeps people buying stuff, right? Because this is about economics. But as you talk about China, I do want to go there for a minute. Uh, we have this pledge that if anything happens to Taiwan, we will intervene. What does that mean in context here? Uh, China is clearly making bellicose statements. They have forever, but it seems to be much more serious now. What does it mean that we support Taiwan no matter what?
Well, you got to understand, first of all, what Taiwan does. The biggest chip maker on the planet. That's the biggest thing. And you start talking chips, I don't know how American life would continue or how we would do things without the chips in our life to control these things. So you got to worry about that. The other thing that we're pushing is getting getting Taiwan to really embrace Western culture. And by doing so, we can hide behind the lie that it ain't us pushing this. Is Taiwan wanting their freedom, wanting to be as they want to be. And this whole thing is in the same basket, Ed, with what I talked about earlier about the westernization of the planet. And, this pushes us one step further into doing that. I recall I was in Taiwan, I'm Taipei, back in 1969, I think it was, long time ago. Went over there to play in a basketball tournament. And we had 2 weeks to do it. So for 2 weeks, didn't do anything but walk around shopping, partaking of the Taiwanese culture, and then at night playing basketball. So that was a wonderful time for me. But I found out at that particular time that way back then, that the average Taiwanese really wanted to embrace Western culture. But there were a lot of them that wanted to hold on to traditional values as well. They didn't like people telling them to speak English when they didn't want to. and they didn't like people telling them how to dress when they wanted to have freedom in doing that. So I found out way back then, I said all that to say, I found out then that everything we hear through the media and we research through our educational system may not be valid. Sometimes we need to visit these countries ourselves and see the situations ourselves to see how the people really feel about these kinds of things. And as you said earlier, we have an ulterior motive as to why we want to, stay close to Taiwan because of economic reasons and technological reasons and the like. So we need to be careful. I'm not sure if anything is worth starting World War III for, because if you have a real all-out World War III, the thing that we call Homo sapien is over, is through.
Yeah.
There will be no more man. So you won't have to argue anymore about which gender is best or which form of government it needs to override what or which. It's just over.
Yeah.
World War III stops the human race in its tracks, and it will be no more.
Yeah. I want to remind you, you're either watching or listening to The Deal with Val Atkinson and Ed Clark. It's Sunday, the 7th of January. And of course, we start out the year, Val, with the world about to blow up again. We're right back in the same place as we were at the beginning of 2023. One last piece of international news before we switch over to our main topic today, which is the Harvard president leaving. We've had a no Ukraine Russia policy on the program for the last year, in that we don't make it the center of discussion. And I made that decision because I think the Europeans had not done a good enough job of policing that situation, and I also think the American policy hasn't been 100% right on Ukraine right now. Right before the end of the year, there was a budget deal, and part of the argument was, should we fund Israel and Ukraine? Right. It doesn't look like that's happened, and it also looks like we still don't have a real budget deal. We may have another continuing resolution in a couple of weeks. But besides that, what's going on with the Ukraine situation in Russia? It's been moved completely off of the TV by Israel. If you turn to any of the networks, they're only talking about Israel, and then they'll have some scant little thing about Ukraine. But what's going to end up happening there? Will there be some stasis at some point where there's a settlement and a border drawn, and people just move on with their lives?
You're being very prophetic there, Ed, on that one, because I think that's exactly what's going to happen. This is the only way out. And it doesn't matter whether or not the Republicans free up some money for the Ukrainian war. And then at some point, the Ukraine can turn this thing around and run Russians back to Russia. And that's not going to happen. At some point, and I don't know when, at some point, the two sides, the Russians and the Ukrainians, are going to have to sit down at the table and say, okay, what are going to be the new geographical political lines drawn regarding the state of Ukraine? How do we draw them now? Let's draw them. Let's have a buffer zone, a peace buffer zone, or whatever involved in that. And let's make sure that both sides agree. Let's shake hands and go on our way. Because Russia is not talking about taking over the entirety of Ukraine. They know that NATO is not going to sit still for that, but they want to increase, to extend or lengthen the border lines between Ukraine and Russia. They want to push back the distance that American troops under NATO will be in Ukraine looking over the Russian border. They want to push that back. That's what this is about in their mind. So if they can get Ukraine to agree that, okay, we'll draw the line and we'll let you guys go another 300-400 miles west of where you were before this thing started, then we'll be okay. But I think that's the way it's going to end. There will be some type of thing brokered by the United States, and we have to give our okay on that. And the Ukrainians are going to be mad, but that's the only choice that they'll have. And hopefully that'll last for maybe another 30 or 40 years before something else happens.
Well, I want it to last at least as long as I'm alive, and then after I'm gone, I can do whatever. You know what I'm saying, Val? You know what? This is a good place for us to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the fact that there's only 10 days to the Iowa caucuses. I talked to some people in Iowa this morning. I want to see what you think about what they had to say. I primarily want to talk about what happened with the president of Harvard resigning and what's behind that, but also the 1/6 anniversary speech that Joe Biden gave. And I think it ties into both this 10 days to Iowa and the Harvard president resigning, because what's behind the consternation by a lot of our white brothers and sisters. So everybody stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Oh man, I can't believe I'm missing this. Okay, Grandma. I see you.
Don't get stuck at home with the flu. A flu shot is the best way to prevent the flu and its potentially serious complications. It keeps you, your community, and loved ones protected. Don't get flu FOMO. Learn more at getmyflushot.org.
For? Yeah, so in Iowa, I'm watching for former President Trump. We've put so much, I think, stock into Governor Ron DeSantis and how he's really built up his organization in Iowa, whether Nikki Haley can trail him or catch up with him. But I think we've seen Trump very quietly building this organization. Now it's really coming to light. I think sometimes we get distracted by the national stories and the court stories, all of that. But he really has perfected the operation in Iowa. And I'm really watching to see what happens to Ron DeSantis, because he's put all of his eggs in the Iowa basket. So there's the question of where does he go if he doesn't come in first or second?
Yeah, it's such a great.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. And we solved all the world's problems. Well, in the first segment, we talked about Israel and Gaza, Hamas, Taiwan, China, Russia, and Ukraine. All of those things play a factor in our lives, not as much as people sometimes make it out to be, Val. But I do want to say that we always need to be concerned about the safety of the world, because you alluded to the fact that we could blow all this to smithereens if somebody makes a decision that that's the only course of action to take. We hope that doesn't happen. But what I said going out is that I want to talk about a number of things that's going to lead me to talk about the Harvard president resigning. The first part of this is it was the anniversary of 1/6, and Joe Biden had some comments. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll talk about it.
Over 140 police officers were injured. Jill and I attended the funeral of police officers who died as a result of the events of that day. Because of Donald Trump's lies, they died because these lies brought a mob to Washington. He promised it would be wild, and it was. He told the crowd to fight like hell, and all hell was unleashed. He promised he would right them. Everything they did, he would be side by side with them. Then, as usual, he left the dirty work to others. He retreated to the White House. As America was attacked from within, Donald Trump watched on TV in the private small dining room off the Oval Office.
So, Val, Joe Biden has been making this, sort of speech over and over again a lot, that democracy is at stake, that we have some real issues here, and if Donald Trump is elected again, we're facing the end of democracy. Talk to me about Biden's speech. What did you think about it? does it move the needle one way or the other with potential voters? Because I know you said this even before, right before we came on. How the hell did 70 some million people vote for Donald Trump in the first place? So let's start there. Talk about Joe Biden's speech and in the overall theme of the danger of us losing democracy.
Well, it's a speech that he should have given a couple years ago. Really. We've been talking here on this show for quite some time now about the MAGA base, independents, and some Democrats being taken down the road and reading the wrong template for what is really going on. And certain media outlets are complicit in this whole process as well. And being led by Donald Trump, but with a lot of other very, very smart conservative people backing him, they have gotten a large portion of the country to believe that it's okay to be lawless. It's okay to think that something happened that you can't prove and to act on that and to make strong beliefs on that and have it to come true. I mean, it's what's going on. While at the same time, people in Biden's camp were talking about quote unquote issues. And you and I have been trying to tell people for months, Ed, if not longer, that it ain't about the traditional issues, guys. And the more you talk about it, the more you help the other side out. And I think Joe Biden's speech, for the first time, got around to that. And he started making people understand that, hey, this is about something bigger than these issues you want to talk about. It's about losing your democracy. Because without a democracy, what does it matter, your tax rate? It can change anytime they want it to for whatever number. And your gas could be $27 a gallon. You can't do anything about it. Your favorite TV program could be off the air because the FCC did not grant it a commission. Hey, look, democracy is the thread that ties all this stuff together. And we're not a bunch of people sitting around at some table with a number 2 pencil and a ledger and an abacus and a Ouija board trying to figure out who we're going to vote for, right? It ain't about that anymore. And Joe Biden's speech finally got around to trying to tell people that it ain't about that, guys. You know, you can let them fool you all you want to about talking about inflation and fool you about talking about crime in Baltimore and Chicago, crime in the street, and even the border is blowing up. And,
Right.
keep talking about that kind of stuff, okay? But you need to know you're voting to either save or jettison democracy.
Well, some skinny black guy that used to live at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I think his name is Obama.
Yeah.
He was critical of the Biden campaign this week. Yeah, out in the open, he said, you need to refocus on what's going to win this. That Trump is the danger, and he said it out loud. And I maybe Biden heard that loud and clear and decided to move in that direction. Which brings me to the convincing people who to vote for. I made a phone call this morning, Val, to Iowa to talk to some people in Iowa before we came on to try to get the tenor and tone of what's going on. Let's take a look at this clip and then we'll talk about what I talked to the people in Iowa
Democracy.
about.
Are they prepared for any other candidate to break through, or are they basically saying we have to assume it's Trump at this point?
Well, you have to be prepared for anybody to break through, but it is helpful that Nikki Haley is not making his argument a bit, and I think it's helpful to have somebody, he's so disruptive out there, he's so chaotic. Right, isn't that what Joe Biden's making the same argument? So in some sense, I'm sure that they welcome Nikki Haley in the final stretches trying to make the case of a dysfunctional person you can't trust to put back in the Oval Office. And I think that at some point, I agree with everything Garrett was saying about the numbers, that somebody would have to beat, if you're going to go with the king, you have to beat the king somewhere. And it seems like Haley's got the best shot, and it would have to be in New Hampshire. In order to win New Hampshire, you'd have to show some momentum in Iowa. And if you come in third in Iowa, I don't think that's the momentum you're looking for. So I would say the highest stakes are for her. She's got to get a second place finish and look like you're cresting.
Julia, do you think that?
So, Val, there's 10 days to the caucus. Now, Iowa is a weird place. Number one, I don't think it should ever be the bellwether to determine who's going to be president, and often it's not. Think about who's won in Iowa, especially on the Republican side. They tend to be very, very religiously conservative and very, much more palatable to those people. And Donald Trump didn't win there. Cruz won in 16. And then you can go down the list of people who've won in Iowa in the caucuses. They don't necessarily end up being the person that wins the nomination. But Donald Trump was in Iowa. Was in Marshalltown the other day and was kicking off his campaign. He all but again said that he was going to go after people who, he feels did them wrong. He disparaged Nikki Haley to the point where I think she's not a viable running mate for him anymore. But some of these people they'll lick his boots regardless. And then, so my question I had for my friend in Iowa this morning was, who do you think is going to emerge as the winner? And she said that more than likely it'd be Trump, but she would not be surprised if it's Nikki Haley. That she talked to a number of Republicans who said that they just cannot stomach Donald Trump anymore. We know it's not going to be Chris Christie, and we know it's not going to be DeSantis. Is Iowa even relevant to this thing, or is this just kabuki theater? And Donald Trump's going to be the nominee. He's going to have to fight through his court cases or whatever, and Nikki Haley's just noise in the background. Is that what we're seeing?
I think so, Ed, and kudos to the Democratic Party, who broke the string of hope that had them tethered to Iowa, because it doesn't make any sense. Democrats don't normally win Iowa in a general election, and it's not where they spend a lot of campaign dollars trying to convince people to go their way. So why are you making that the number one place that you stop? Okay, doesn't make any sense. I mean, Iowa doesn't have 20 or 30 electoral college votes or anything even close to that. So why are they up there? It doesn't matter, and the Democrats finally went to South Carolina, which makes more sense. It makes a lot of sense. But I think that the MAGA folks and conservative Republicans have convinced themselves, Ed, that any show of neglect toward Donald Trump or not following and towing the line means a loss in the primary. And that is what scares them to death. They know that as soon as you cross Donald Trump, somebody running against you is going to get $5 or $10 million to run against you in the campaign. And that's what fears them. I mean, it's gotten so bad that it's like in the old mob days in the 20s and the teens, where people running extortion rings in big cities like New York did it out in the open with the understanding, almost and approval of the police. This is what's going on in the Republican Party now. They know you say something bad against Donald Trump and they primary you. So that's enough right there to keep everybody on the straight and narrow. So it's not even a party anymore.
Yeah.
It gets down to the question as to who has the nerve and the guts to say what is on their mind, to even leave the Republican Party and start a new party. You don't have to go to the Democratic Party or become an independent. Start a new party, whatever. The Republican Party, as we know it now, wasn't established until 1854. So you go back and think about, what did these guys do in 52?
Right.
And, and in 50 and in 48, back during that time. Were they Whigs? Because the Whig Party left right before them. So it can happen again. You just got to have enough people with enough guts to do something about it and stop being afraid of being primaried.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I want to remind you folks that you're listening to and watching the deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. Val, I think this election and certainly the last election and the one before that were clearly, to me, referendums on whiteness. I don't know how else to say it. There was this sort of reaction to Obama having won twice that I think allowed Trump to ascend, because there were some really mad white people on the far right. If you listen to Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, they all but say it, right? When the people attacked on 1-6, they were calling the people, the black police officers, out of their name. They had Confederate flags walking around in there. What else? What else do you need to prove that this is about white people being afraid? Which leads me to the Harvard president, President Gay, who had only been there for 6 months or so, being run out of office, supposedly because of her testimony at the Congress about Israel. And then it turns out that you see some people fishing, trying to find stuff in her dissertation that may be suspect. And even the people who she quoted in the dissertation have come back and said that that's not plagiarism. And if you look at any document, any PhD dissertation and writings in academia, they all kind of skirt that. I mean, unless they're outright plagiarized, that this isn't classic plagiarism. Nevertheless, the Republicans on the right use those issues, and then the leftists acquiesce. They agree and run the person out, Al Franken, or pick a person, right? So Val, talk to me about what happened at Harvard, what it's about, and what does it mean for things like DEI and just being able to talk about blackness in America and that kind of thing. Are they just that afraid? What are they afraid of?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm glad we are handling this, because it's something that I always wanted to talk about. I didn't think it was appropriate to bring it up when we were talking about the Israeli-Hamas war. But it is appropriate to bring it up here when we're talking about Dr. Gay, because the impetus for all of the things that she's going through or went through has to do with the fear that people have of Israelis' complaint, or the Jewish state's complaint about, I am being done wrong. I am mistreated. You are allowing somebody to say something bad about me and you won't shut them up. You can't do anything against me. And I'm wondering, where is all this power coming from? It has to be dollars. It's the only thing I can figure out. That the Jewish coalition and everywhere you can look is they do movies, they do banks, they have money in markets, they have money everywhere you can have money. So maybe, and the biggest one is that they give to campaigns, political campaigns. So maybe that's the reason that when they say, hey, I have been wronged, and before they can get the last word wronged out, there's somebody jumping through hoops wanting, okay, who do you want me to go after? I'm sorry. What did they do to you? And we need to stop that. And speaking as a black man, I'm pissed off that they didn't hear our cries in that way. Maybe because we didn't have anything to offer. They weren't worried about, if we don't listen to black folks, how are we going to suffer? Until a vote came along, and then they start acting a little differently in certain places. Okay. but they don't act differently where our vote doesn't count that much. They keep doing the same thing. But we have got to first take a look at this power that the Israeli lobby really handles, that you can't, not only can you not say anything bad about them, you can't allow things to be said bad about them. And that's the problem with Dr. Gay. It's not what she said. It's what the students at Harvard said, that they're claiming she didn't stop. She didn't do enough to stop them from being pro-Hamas. She didn't do enough to stop these kids from exercising First Amendment rights.
Mm.
That's how this whole thing got started, that she should have jumped in and said, yo, you're being too pro-Hamas and not enough pro-Israeli. So we got to do something about you.
Well, here's the weird part of it, Val. You got people in the Republican Party, their base is anti-Semitic. Now they support Israel and are anti-Semitic at the same time because of their weird religious bent that says that you got to blow up the Middle East so Jesus can come back.
Yeah.
So as I step on toes right now, think about these pastors that you're following, folks. They believe that this state of Israel has to exist, and then there has to be this constant conflict, and then a big conflagration, and then Jesus is going to come back to take you up yonder. And so that's why they do the things they do on the right, like simultaneously hate Jews and support Israel, and then accuse Black Harvard presidents of being anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. And then when that doesn't really stick, they go looking for stuff like plagiarism, which is an old saw that the right does. They question your credentials, right? Because they don't believe a Black person should have ascended to presidency at Harvard anyway, because it's the oldest institution in America. It's elite, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And whether or not people view it as left or right, a lot of conservative white folks went to Harvard or Yale or any of those Ivy League. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, all of them, DeSantis, they all went to school at those schools. Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh. I mean, think about the schools they went to. So here, Val, as we wrap this up, Dr. Gay is out of a job at Harvard. DEI is under attack in general everywhere else. There's been Supreme Court decisions like the case against the University of North Carolina and Harvard about student admissions. They've gone after grant programs for Black women, specifically saying that you can't have a program that's specifically for Black women, even though it's a private fund that wants to get. Now they're going into private institutions and trying to affect private institutions. So what's the end game for them, and what should we be doing instead of just sitting here bemoaning the fact that she doesn't have a job anymore?
So she reverted back to her old position. She's going to still be on the faculty. As I always thought that when I was teaching at North Carolina Central University, I always really thought it was something that should be taken away in order to hold people with high positions feet to the fire. If they didn't have anywhere to go, if they couldn't revert back to their old professorships, maybe they'd act a little differently. So she did that. It's always a part of the contract that, yes, I'll become chancellor or I'll become president or whatever the position may be. And at any time, I can revert back to my job as a professor of political science or whatever discipline you happen to be a part of. And that's where she is right now. But as you said correctly, she's out of that top job. She's out of the job as being the first African-American and the first woman to hold the top seat at the most prestigious university, arguably, in the United States of America, Harvard University. And that was a step too far, a bridge too far, and everything else for some people to attest to. what they like doing, Ed, they like showing symbols. They like taking their little kids and grandkids to these places and see all of these lines of white male faces that have been president of institutions from the 18th century on up to now, and those kinds of things. And every now and then you'll see something says number 44. Oh, that's a skinny black guy. Or another number that's Dr. Gay. And they don't like that. And, you know, if they can get these people out, even once they get the jobs, Ed, if they can throw enough dirt or find enough muck to throw on them to take them out, then they start spreading the lie that they never should have been there. And the only way they got there was through some program, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or affirmative action, or whatever you want to call it, that's the only way they got there. And they did not earn the credentials that they got. That's when the whole trolling comes about to find out, is there any problems with the dissertation?
Yeah.
You know, it was a comma out of place someplace.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No,
So that's how she got to be where she is.
Yeah, unfortunate for her, because I would have liked to see what she would have been able to do. You know what? I hear some music. That means we need to take a break. When we come back, we need to talk about the Supreme Court, Val. Those clowns. So I'll just leave it at that. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this, man.
The resignation of former Harvard President Claudine Gay has hardly settled any of the debate surrounding her short tenure or how the university handled a number of issues. In fact, many, including Gay herself, are raising concerns about the potential impact the Harvard case may have on higher education more widely. William Brangham has our conversation.
Gay's departure came after conservative activists unearthed multiple examples of alleged plagiarism in her work. While Gay did admit to several mistakes, she argues she's been unfairly targeted because of her race, her ideology, and her push for diversity in academia. Her resignation also followed her widely panned congressional testimony about anti-Semitism on university campuses. So for two...
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat.
One. And welcome back to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson, retired Professor Val Atkinson, formerly North Carolina Central University. Also an author, too, and we want to talk about that before we get out of here. We want to catch up on where he is on his latest book. And it's important for people to know when we bring up historical information and that kind of thing, there's a reason that we can. We have a resident scholar on staff, as it were, on the program who can talk about that and has studied and has written about politics and why people do the things they do and so on and so forth. So, when we left off, we were talking about the Harvard president, former president, Dr. Gay, and then just how scared some people seem to be that I guess Negroes and brown people are going to take over. I can count, Val, when I look at maps and I see where people are concentrated. The way our political system works, it doesn't help that all the brown and black people are concentrated, right? So if you're in North Carolina, everybody's in Charlotte, Raleigh, and Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and Wilmington if you're black. But the way they have constructed districts doesn't matter. You can never cobble together enough black people to make meaningful run at some positions, right? And then if you look across the country, all those seats in Congress, there's plenty of places where there's no effect of black people at all, even in a state like Mississippi, right? because they can make it that way. But certainly in Idaho and New Hampshire and Vermont and places like that, in Iowa that we talked about earlier, there's no effect of black people, not just on the vote, but on holding positions, taking jobs from people, taking university slots from people. It's all made up. It's a phantasm, right? It's in their head that they think Negroes, these magic Negroes. Val, and I have to write my book about this. I think it's because they see too many black people on TV entertaining. They then assume, because they're in their head, their children got all their music from black people. Their children wear jerseys with black men's names on it, right? Their sons want black girlfriends. It's a whole bunch of psychological stuff going on. And so the number gets inflated. The fact is, black folks still only make up 12, 13% of the population. That's it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you happen to be, since it's Sunday, happen to amble by your TV and switch to one of the major networks, they're showing a football game, and 80% of the people out there are going to be black folks running around. And in some cases, on some plays, nearly every single person is black on the offense and defense. Mm-hmm. So Val, I say all that to say, I think it's psychological, mainly, and I don't know what you do about it. But this brings me to, I talked about Idaho, mentioned Idaho just real quick, and I want to talk about the Supreme Court because they're up to their usual shenanigans. One of the things that they did on a Friday, like they often do nowadays, is they'll rule on something. It wasn't a ruling. They just deferred. They said, well, we don't want to hear this case right now. And in Idaho, they have a near total ban on abortion. And they've criminalized it too. You go to jail if you get an abortion. If you get an abortion, if you help somebody get one, whatever, you go to jail. And instead of staying the lower court and saying this law can't go into effect, they say, oh, it can go into effect, which is very unusual. A couple of lawyers I talked to in the last day or two said, nah, that doesn't normally happen. Which brings me to the point that this Supreme Court is a dangerous court because they also have to hear a case about elections. And in this case about Maine and Colorado, who said that Donald Trump can't be on the ballot. So talk to me first about this thing with Maine and Colorado. Do either of those two things stand? And I've heard some people say, oh, the Democrats shouldn't want that because then it makes Trump more of a martyr. I don't give a shit. But you tell me, should I care or not what these people are saying?
Well, I think it should stand. I think the Supreme Court should stand with Maine and Colorado on this thing because one of the lawyers on the conservative side I heard say that, well, Trump hasn't been charged and definitely ain't been convicted yet of being an insurrectionist. So why are you taking him off? And the Secretary of State out of Maine has it in her job description, if you will, because it's a part of the Constitution that basically says that she is to make the decision, or the Secretary of State is to make the decision as to whether or not the person would be on the ballot based on the data that's put before them. And so she's just carrying out her job based on what the Constitution said. But I want to go back further than that. And I want to go back to the year of 1860. This is before the Civil War. There was an election in 1860. Abraham Lincoln got elected. And this was before the Civil War. It was before the secession of South Carolina. And of the states that were to become the Confederacy, only one state allowed Abraham Lincoln to be on the ballot. That was Virginia. The other states didn't even allow him on the ballot. So how did they take him off the ballot? How did they remove him from the ballot without convicting or indicting him or convicting him? However that was done, that's already precedent and it's already in the books that it can be done. So to say that this guy has not been indicted, he's not been convicted yet, so you can't say that he's an insurrectionist and apply the 14th Amendment, the third Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. You can't do that yet. And I offer, in contradiction to that, what happened in the race of 1860, the general election, when Abraham Lincoln wasn't allowed to be on the ballot in 10 states.
Well, here's the other thing that they've been arguing, Val. Donald Trump says his oath of office doesn't swear allegiance to the Constitution. I don't know if you've heard that one.
Yeah, I've heard.
And I'm like, what the hell did we hear when he put his hand on the Bible? Did he say to protect and defend the Constitution? I think these people are so cynical. It's mind-boggling. And a lot of those Republicans up on the Hill, they walk around with constitutions in their pocket, as if that means something. You know, I'm just curious though, is what you think will happen in court, because one of the things I've heard is that Gorsuch had already sat on a case about removing somebody from the ballot, and he was clear that you could, that the states, because elections are the domain of the state, right? There's no federal requirement to make all ballots the same and give the same days that you can vote, the same early voting days. The absentee ballot is different in every state. So even getting on the ballot in some states, you have to have a certain number of signatures. Ask the Libertarians and the Greens. Every election cycle, they have to go out and stand in front of Food Line and collect signatures so they can even get on the ballot. So, I don't know. I'm worried about this court. I think Roberts is okay, but again, even if you have Roberts, you still lose 5-4.
Yep.
And then Clarence Hankyhead Thomas will not recuse himself in any of these cases. Sorry, Val. You can hit me with a wet noodle because I called him Hanky Head, but Clarence Thomas is a dangerous man, and I know where he and Alito are going to be. I'm just not sure about Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh is the unknown here, don't you think, Val?
Well, I think Donald Trump kind of let the cat out of the bag when his folks are saying now that he owes them one, and he's got to show that he's grateful for what Donald Trump did for him. So, yeah, I think we kind of got Kavanaugh. I mean, this is not a sales pitch here. This is the court of the United States of America, the highest court of the United States of America. And Trump and his dominions and that kind of thing, they don't understand this. But and it doesn't matter to the MAGA crowd and to conservative Republicans, but to everybody else. That's another piece in the thing saying, hey, these guys don't care anything about our form of government. They want to strike it all down, destroy it, start all over again with an oligarchy with one guy at the top and everybody else at the bottom. It's called a flat organizational structure that we had. The biggest one, the most famous one, was when Moses was walking through the desert and they had a flat organizational structure. He was at the top and everybody else was equal at the bottom. So you can't have that. You can't have that kind of organizational structure and have it. But that's what Trump wants. And if he gets power, that's what he'll get. But getting back to these court people here, Ed, you're right. Roberts won't help out. You got a 6-3 conservative majority. And if Robert goes over to the other side, it'll still be 5-4. I don't know who you've got over there. Maybe Kavanaugh may get kind of jittery about what Trump and his guys have said about being in Trump's pocket. And maybe he may go along with Roberts to show that he's not in Trump's pocket. That's a long hope, but that's the only one I see.
Yeah, that's the only path that I had put down because I think Gorsuch is a liar. So he frequently flip flops. No matter how he rules in the lower court, he's had a propensity to change his mind when it came to stuff when it got to the Supreme Court. And by them calling out Kavanaugh, it kind of it should spook him if he got any kind of conscience. I don't know if he does or not, Val. Uh, I just worry that I'm not sure. I'm worried that Trump is going to win. I'm just concerned about the continued upset that Trump causes and Trumpism causes. Which leads me to the last topic I want to talk about today. Let's take a look at this clip and then we'll talk about it.
Expectations, this job market, it refuses to slow down. We ended last year on a high note.
A high note indeed. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. added 216,000 jobs in December. And this is more than analysts expected and capped a year of steady gains. Most positions added were in government, healthcare, social assistance, and construction. Economists predicted the unemployment rate would rise slightly, but it remained at 3.7%. The report is crucial for the Federal Reserve as it's considering cutting interest rates as early as March. Officials will be closely watching the next inflation report, which is set to be released next week.
So, Val, guess what? Gas prices went down. Inflation is down. The stock market is up. And even people like Janet Yellen and Mr. Summers, who was saying that this was a for sure recession, is now saying, oh, well, a soft landing is going to happen. I speculate, Val, that there were people, rich people, who wanted to say that there was inflation and they're headed to recession because they did not want Joe Biden to win. And the reason why they didn't want him to win is because of something that nobody really knows about, is that he has tried to fix the tax code without letting anybody know, and rich people could possibly start paying more taxes. He still has been trying to take care of the student loan thing that the rich people who own the student loans don't want him to fix, right? Because they stand to make billions of dollars, people paying on student loans forever. They don't like Joe Biden has done that. But the reality is the economy is pretty good. And people spent more than ever, Val, $222 billion between Thanksgiving and Christmas just online. It's the biggest year ever online. So you can't tell the story that the economy is bad and Joe Biden's bad for the economy. So you go back and run and do this other stuff, talk about immigration and the border, and they go down and do their little photo ops in front of the border. They talk about DEI at Harvard and try to get rid of the Harvard president because they drug her up to Congress in hopes of making her look bad. You know that's what it was about, because that has a knock-on effect with the MAGA crowd. And they say, oh, you see what we're doing? We're keeping these Negroes in their place. So, Val, with the economy actually being better than what everybody said it was going to be, we know, though, that Joe Biden can't campaign on that. Is he going to be able, is Joe Biden and the Democrats and the people around him going to be smart enough not to play into the hands of the Republicans and beat Trump on Trumpism? Or is this going to be a nail biter on election night?
Oh, either way, it's going to be a nail biter. It's not going to be a blowout. But I think what the Democrats are charged with now is coming up with a plan, a strategy that does not include the so-called issues. And how are they going to do that? They have to first convince themselves that there is no old lady sitting out there that's truly on the fence between Biden and Trump and waiting for more information about the economy or this, that, and the other to help her decide who she's going to vote for. All who believe that, stand on your head. It's like telling the guy there's a guy he really can't make a decision between Jesus and Lucifer. You know, I just need a little bit more information. You know what I mean? I just need a little. Okay, tell me about something else. Give me more examples here. You know, I just don't believe that person exists.
Yeah.
I just don't believe there's somebody out there that's right on the middle between Trump and Biden, and a little piece of information like gas prices or this, that, and the other, gonna say, okay, I'll vote for Biden, you know. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of Democratic strategists who obviously do believe that because they keep talking about it.
And they keep doing it, and they do it cycle after cycle, and it has resulted in loss after loss. And now, again, we're in North Carolina. I can tell you, I blame Democratic strategists for the loss of the lieutenant governor race the last time. I blame them for some council of state losses because they do those kind of things. They don't run the right kind of campaigns. And I
Oh
know
yeah.
that happens in other states too. I don't know. They have this formula. They stick to it. They never want to deviate, and they try to run all off this thing all the time that there's this voter that we're going to swing, and for them to continue to say they're swing voters, they're people that either come to the polls or don't. Right?
Well, it's like in the military. Some generals are always accused of fighting the last war. Their strategies are always based on what went wrong the last time or what went right the last time. And each war is different. And you can't come up with a strategy for this war based on how you went the last one. And that's what Democratic strategists have as their biggest problem. They keep thinking the same way they thought in the 70s and in the 80s. And hey, things have changed, folks, you know, and you need to change with it in order to have a good strategy that people can win by. And the other thing that Democratic strategists really hurt their candidates with, these guys make a lot of money. I had a small company at one point that I was placing minority media ads for Democratic candidates. And I tell you, I got 17% off the top before I place any ad. And when somebody's coming to you with six figures saying, hey, we want these ads placed around this is state these are statewide ads. We want to spend $125,000 in radio, and we want to spend $300,000 in TV for this March. And I'm counting $17,000 off the top for every $100,000 that's being spent. So it wasn't bad money. It wasn't bad money at all, and that's what these strategists are doing. And anytime some people like Ed Clark or Val Atkinson comes up with a novel idea or something different, they want to shoot us down or tell people, well, where's this guy's credentials? What has he done? And no, you better listen to me. I've been working with Strom and Stram and Strong and all these people. You know,
You've been losing too.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know that the last thing that reminds me of the friend I was talking to in Iowa this morning. She said that she was really pissed off at the Democrats for not having a strategy of invading the Republican caucus and causing some upset because there's no reason to go to the Democratic caucus. She was like, so they should have been organizing to go because in Iowa you could go to the Republican caucus and they could have just thrown that in complete disarray. But she said there was no concerted effort to do anything around caucus time because there's nothing for the Democrats to do. You know, they're not going to gain any more voters. So why not, you know, do what Republicans do, which is cause confusion. I don't know. I guess we'll leave it at that. You know, as always, Val, I always ask you what you're working on, anything we need to know in the coming week or weeks.
Well, still working on the second edition of Distractions, which was my second book, and trying to polish it. It's to the polishing state now, making sure that we got all our T's crossed and our I's dotted, and we're in place to make a good showing this time. So I'll be glad to come on the deal again and really promote it well. And this will be one of the first places I'll come once the new book is out to talk about how to access that. So that's what I'm working on right now. Plus, my little boys, the Cardinals basketball team.
Fire the coach. Fire the coach.
That'll probably help them out quite a bit. But we're still winning. We're defending champions, and we got a good record so far this year.
Yeah,
But
well,
that keeps me going.
Well, that's good because, like we've talked about this before. We both played sports, Val, and we love sports and love to be connected to it. It's not to be all end all. I think the beauty of sport is teaching young folk, young men and women how to be better folks if they got good coaching. And I know that you're a good coach. I will give you that accolade, despite the fact you like Duke. But that's a whole nother story. Look, man, I hear some music, so that means we got to go. I need for you to come back next week for another edition of The Deal with Ed Clark, Val Atkinson, and go out and do something good for somebody today. We really do mean that. That's what we always say at the end of the show. And we'll see you next time. Bye.